Yeah.
Welcome everyone to ordinary meeting of Hunters Hill Council number 4535. Could I ask you all to please be upstanding? I'd like to show my respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, of elders past, present and emerging. We're joined today by Robin Harvey, who's from the Gladesville Boronia Park Uniting Church, who's going to deliver the prayer.
Creator God, we give thanks to the Wallamedical people who looked after this land for thousands of years. We pray for the elders past, present and emerging, that as we continue to learn to live together on this land, we pray for hearts that seek to be reconciled and united as one. We pray tonight for peace among nations. There is so much turmoil in our world, Lord, that your love and compassion is needed more than ever. We pray for people affected by homelessness in our great city of Sydney. Be with the many organisations that give love and assistance to the many hundreds living in hardship. Help our governments and councils to find ways to make housing more affordable and more available. We pray for all local councils, especially for the councillors of Hunters Hill. We give thanks for the care and concern they have for their communities. We pray for Zach, our mayor, for councillors Ross, Julia, Elizabeth, Tatiana, Jim and Richard, for Mitchell, our general manager, and for all staff. We pray for their families and all who support and uphold them. We pray that they will have the spirit of wisdom, compassion and generosity. Pray for the willingness to work together for the common good of this municipality. We pray for the churches in this municipality that their witness to all will give hope to many that God is with them at all times. We pray, knowing this, that you are always listening with a loving and concerned heart. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated and thank you, Robin, for delivering the prayer. The proceedings of all council meetings in open session, including all debate and addresses by the public, are recorded and webcast live on council's website for the purpose of facilitating community access. Webcast archives are stored and available on the public to the public on council's website. The recordings may be disclosed under the provisions of the Government Information Public Access Act of 2009, the GIPA Act. Members of the public attending council meeting may have their image, voice and personal information, including their name and address, recorded, publicly broadcast and archived, or as an observer or other interested party, members of the public consent to the use of their image, voice and personal information. Councillors, we have no apologies for this evening.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor.
Mr General Manager.
I'd just like to acknowledge an apology from Maria Kenny, our Director of Finance. Unfortunately and sadly, unexpectedly today, she's dealing with bereavement and her family.
Thank you, General Manager. Are there any other apologies? No. If not, are there any declarations of interest? There are no declarations of interest. Can I move to item 1, confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting held for meeting 4534 held 27th of May 2024. Move Councillor Preston, seconded Councillor Williams. Any discussion? If not, all those in favour? Against, that is carried unanimously. We have 2 mayoral minutes, councillors. I'll go to item 2.1, which is a mayoral minute recognising those that made the King's Birthday honour list this year. And I'll read the mayoral minute. On 9th of June 2024, the Governor-General of the Commonwealth, His Excellency General the Honourable David Hurley, announced 737 awards in the King's Birthdays honour list for 2024. Among the recipients was Hunters Hill resident Talal Yassin, who was appointed a member of the Order of Australia and AM. Talal was appointed as a member of the Order of Australia for significant service to business and to the community. Mr. Yassin is a founder and managing director of Salam, formerly known as Crescent Wealth, which provides Australia's Muslim population access to inclusive wealth creation and personal finance solutions. He is also the director of Salam Finance and the executive director of the Salam Foundation and the Salam Institute. Talal was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia in 2010 for service to business and the community through a range of education, health and multicultural organisations. Talal is also an adjunct professor at the School of Business at the University of Western Sydney and Vice-Chancellor's Honorary Professional Fellow at the ANU and a Fellow at Macquarie University Law School. He was the former chair of the Council for the Australian-Arab Relations and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and former director of Australia Post and Sydney Ports. In an article published in the Governor-General's website about the recipient, Talal pays tribute to his parents and family and offers his wisdom. In my view, to achieve happiness in life is to be of service to others. We focus on connections, building new ones, strengthening those already there and forging bonds across cultural and social divides. We cast ripples out of the world that can have an unimaginable impact. My work ethic comes from my parents who sacrificed everything to give our family a new beginning, and I'd be driven to make their sacrifices count for something. I congratulate Talal and thank him for contributing to our community here in Hunters Hill. Councillors, any discussion? If not, I'll put the mayoral minute. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. Item 2.2 is another mayoral minute. This is to inform the community about the Blue Plaques program. There's been a second round of Blue Plaques program rolled out by the New South Wales government. This is just to receive the note and to consider nominations through the community to the Blue Plaques program. Each year, the New South Wales government calls for nominations from the public for the Blue Plaques program. Now in its third year, it aims to promote the stories of people and events who have shaped the history of New South Wales. There are usually 20 successful nominations in each round. The program mirrors a similar initiative started in the United Kingdom in 1866. Nomination for this year's Blue Plaques program are open till June 30. Hunters Hill Municipality has always had a rich history of pioneers and significant influences intertwined into our area. As Australia's oldest garden suburb, with 75% of the municipality declared conservation area, there is no doubt many historical figures in Hunters Hill that have made an impact to our state. Emancipist businesswoman Mary Reeby is one particular local resident who has had national impact. She has already been immortalised on the Australian $20 note. In 1835, she purchased a 38-acre cottage in Hunters Hill and soon added 110 acres to the property. She named the place, which now sits on One Reeby Road, Fig Tree Farm, after the large Port Jackson fig, which grew by the water. Mary was a successful businesswoman and her prominence inspired many across the country. If Mary was nominated, it could be suggested to include the plaque at the newly opened Fig Tree Park, which is close to her previous residence. Historical figures like Mary were included in a project undertaken by Hunters Hill Council and Hunters Hill Historical Society in 2011 to celebrate our municipality's sesquicentenary. 40 footpath plaques were created and installed to identify some of our historic places and the people who lived there. The plaques were generously funded by the Marty family. The research undertaken in this project can be used as a basis to nominate local figures from history who would be deserving of a blue plaque commemoration in our area. It would be great to encourage our community to make their own submissions, and some of the below requirements of the Blue Plaques program are that they must relate to a person, group or event. The person, group or event must be real and historically accurate. The story must be appropriate, sensitive and engaging to a wide public audience, and the person and people must have passed away more than 20 years ago. The event must have taken place more than 20 years ago, and the location for the suggested plaque must be in New South Wales or must have a direct connection to the story, be visible and have access 24/7 to the public. Councillors, any any further comments about the Blue Plaques program? Noting that it is a little bit, it is a short period between now and when the nominations close. If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Councillors, conscious that we've got two speakers here, we have Heather Kitson, who is just coming to address council, who I think it would probably be appropriate to allow her to do that now. She's not speaking to any particular item. If we're comfortable with doing that, move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Prieston. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Ms. Kitson. Thank you for addressing council. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, General Manager and councillors. My name is Heather Kitson. First, I'd like to congratulate council on Fig Tree Park. It is visually stunning and very beautiful as you drive by. And on a beautiful day like today, it was lovely seeing children playing on the sparkling new equipment and people enjoying sitting on the benches and enjoying sunshine. I'm sure there are many hurdles, but what a wonderful outcome. Last month, myself and some residents were the event organisers of the Hunters Hill Vintage Antique and Homewares Fair. Once again, I'd like to thank the council and the magnificent staff for all their assistance and being a big part of this 3-day event and its success. It was a success in that it paid for itself, but its real success is it promotes sustainability and the circular economy. And most importantly, even more importantly, supports micro businesses, almost 20, almost exclusively women, and mostly local in the creative sphere. So for me, I think that is a really important factor of this event. We were also able to make a contribution to Giant Steps greenhouse project, which I'm sure you're all very versed in and know what a fantastic organisation and project that is. We had people attend from Old Bar, Erskineville, Annandale, Pymble, Chiswick, Drummoyne, Balmain, lots from Lane Cove, Northbridge, Camaray, Chatswood, Ryde, Gladesville, Willoughby, Mossman, Bowral, Burradoo, Mittagong, Essington Park, the Blue Mountains, Woolwich and Hunters Hill. Interesting, we had less than we would have liked from our local community. A local community event being staged has a couple of communication issues that I wish to highlight and take advice. Obviously, the council has all the residents of Hunters Hill's communication information and they are tightly held due to privacy. Posters are not generally welcome in the public sphere anymore, nor flyers because of a well-directed environmental kickback. We, of course, have our own forms of media distribution through social media and our own newsletter. We were grateful for the inclusion in the Mayor's column and newsletter. With the Hunters Hill Council newsletter, we would have appreciated coverage in the lead up rather than being mentioned only on the day it opened.
Sorry, Heather, one moment. Move the extension of time. Councillor Prieston, seconded Councillor Williams. All those in favour? Against? That is carried.
Thank you. We were thankful to hang a banner from the front of the council. Funny, but we had some Woolwich residents attend because they were told about it by their friends in the Blue Mountains who travelled down for the event. We had people who made a day of it and wanted to know how to get to the Woolwich Pier for lunch and then catch the ferry from Valencia Street to Circular Quay. I, for one, wish to see council as well as community events succeed. I'm suggesting this event is a positive for this community. It is organised by the community for the community, but how can we successfully communicate to this community in an effective and cost-effective way and in an environmental manner? Thank you for your time, and I will just leave you with those thoughts. And like I say, once again, thank you to the Hunters Hill Council.
Thanks, Heather. If you could just stay there for one moment, if councillors have any questions from Councillor Prieston.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Heather. This is something that has been brought to our attention before through various channels. I am the chair of the Events and Cultural Committee of Council, and at our last meeting, we actually suggested to our Director of Events that there be some kind of a calendar we already do have an events calendar that's published, but on social media channels as well, and regularly. We thought that might be a good idea. Do you think that would be a good way of disseminating information in relation to events, or what kind of channel do you think is most appropriate if not social media?
Look, I feel like anything is great, anything is good, and that would be amazing. It's a very tricky situation because I know there's so much around privacy issues, but an EDM, like a marketing about certain events directly to residents would be amazing for us. And when we did speak to residents about the place, they didn't feel well connected in terms of communication about this. So that would probably be my first take, but I appreciate there's tricks there. It's a very grey area. I would like to see some form of communication because I feel like that's really important to community. When you've got good communication, you've got good community. An event like this, it would be lovely to see everybody walking out the door and supporting and attending, especially since we had such a fantastic range from Greater Sydney. I would be happy to perhaps think a little bit more about it and maybe come up with some ideas and email you.
Yeah, that would be great. And yeah, it would be great if you would consider joining the committee for the next term of council because we love your ideas in a more formal way.
Heather would be an absolute natural for the Cultural and Events Committee. But
I just have one quick follow-up question, sorry.
Yes.
Outside of the vintage fair event,
Yes.
Do you feel like you have been properly informed of other events that council helps run throughout the year, for example, Mookabola and other things, or do you feel like it's across the board? Or
do you know what I feel as though it's two entities coming from two different spaces? I feel like a council event, once upon a time, many years ago, Mookabola used to be run by a lot of the parents in the community. I'm a long-term parent in this community and go back that far, so I know that. And now, for a variety of social reasons, things are flipped over. It's more of a council event now. I think what I'm probably saying, it's hard coming from outside and putting on an event, even though I am a member of this community and a resident, it's coming from a different space, and there's some hurdles that I would love to work with the council to try and overcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Crasaway.
So just to that last point, how do you see yourself working with council to overcome the hurdles? By joining the committee or by workshopping with council officer? What do you mean by you'd like to help council overcome hurdles?
Maybe that's probably perhaps the wrong language. I think that I don't really understand. Like, I've had this lovely introduction from Chris 5 minutes in the foyer, who explained how tonight's evening went. Thank you, Chris. But I think really the first step is to communicate and discuss. And thank you for allowing me to be here tonight to unravel this before you. So I think probably the first step is communication and talking about it.
Thanks, Heather. Any questions? Councillor Vergara.
Question of you. Question of another.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you. Councillor Vergara, question?
Probably to the chair of the committee. Did the vintage fair go through the committee?
Councillor Preston? No.
So maybe that's one way that council officers could notify that.
I think having that capacity to, as Councillor Preston said, publish the calendar more often, maybe even a community dashboard on the website, something like that. I know we'll have to work through that a bit more.
Ask for it like maybe 5 times.
It's certainly something long before I was on council that actually Councillor Quinn was the mayor at the time, and we created a community networking event for community groups and organisations who run events in Hunters Hill. And with Councillor Williams tried to develop, who also wasn't on council at the time, but we tried to develop a community calendar. And that was around keeping the community abreast of events, but also making sure events didn't clash and trying to share sponsorship around the community. So all these things have happened, and that calendar was very well run for a while. And certainly before Councillor Williams was on council, there was an organisation called Discover Hunters Hill who did a lot of local promotion of events as well. So I think when the community are aware that there's an opportunity to see what's on in their suburb more, and Facebook groups and so on help. The Village Observer in particular is a really good promotional channel. But the events committee of council is for council run events, and that was why I raised it with the then Mayor Quinn, that disparity between community run events that council's happy to support and council run events. And there are different things. So, but it's a great conversation to reopen, as it has been done many times in the past. There's always room for fresh energy.
And I do think that it's now become a hybrid calendar, because we do have things like the garden competition and other events that aren't just council run on that calendar. But what I've been trying to ask the staff for is for that calendar to be more widely disseminated, because right now I think it's just posted on the website.
Yep. Councillors, anyway. I might bring that to a close. It's probably a very good opportunity to plug that Hunters Hill Music is going to be opening their next event in 2 weeks. So for the multitudes of people that I know are logged in on YouTube, thousands of people that are logged in watching this, every move that they are. Yep, I'm on. That you can get your tickets through the Hunters Hill Music website. Councillors, I'll move on. Now, I'm just conscious that Mr. Mutton is also here to discuss item 4.3, the draft Henley Precinct Master Plan. Are you happy to move that forward? Councillor Quinn moved, second to Councillor Sanderson. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Mutton. We're going to consider item 4.3. You may address council. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't think anything I say tonight will be a surprise to you. Thank you very much, and I'll be brief. The process for developing this master plan is a model for future community consultation, and the resulting plan is absolutely excellent. The previous consultation regarding the sports ground presumed a synthetic field was the right solution without the benefit of broad community consultation at its beginning. And the path back to a superior natural grass field caused a great deal of angst in the community and some lost time. And you're probably well aware of how long it's taken to get to what we have today, which is a brilliant natural grass field. By contrast, this master plan started with broad community consultation, and I'm looking to Annie because I very much appreciate Annie's leadership through this, followed by several stages of consultative refinement. The process has been efficient and it's been effective, in my view, and my compliments to the council and to the consultants for this work. I note from the public submissions that there are still some concerns regarding availability of parking spaces, but equally the master plan acknowledges that further investigation can be undertaken during detailed design. And I emphasise that because during the consultation phase, there was quite a deal of concern, particularly by the Bridge Club, around the parking. So that is a critical question for us to get a satisfactory resolution on. But as I had said in my submission, I was very comfortable with the process the consultants have gone through on that. I'd like to press for just one matter that was not picked up in the consultants' response to public submissions. The access for Henley residents via the lower Crown Street access, which is there, is quite small. It needs to be preserved because otherwise we're talking about people taking strollers up the hill to get to the driveway, etc., etc. So I couldn't see that change in the plan. So I'd just like to emphasise that. We used to walk my grandchildren to the preschool via that path. And so it's a very personal request, but one that goes to the needs of the Henley community. So thank you very much, council and consultants, not here tonight perhaps, but thank you very much for this excellent work on the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. You could just stay there for one moment, and we know how much work you put into this master plan as well. Councillors, have you got any questions? Councillor Quinn.
So, Chris, yeah, just to be that specific on that point you made about the connection with Crown Street. So, are you talking about the direct link from the bottom end of the whole Crown land property straight onto that driveway that runs down behind the...
Yes, when you drive down Crown Street,
yep,
and you do a little turn into Lower Crown Street,
yep,
it's very narrow and there are houses there, and when you get to the end of those houses there is a small entry point, and then there's a set of stairs above that. That entry point gives Henley residents direct access to the preschool, which is critical. It also gives us access to the other facilities, the community centre, and walk up to the ferry, etc. I used it a lot through the last year when I was in the city. So
just for clarification, do you mean off the end of Bayview Crescent?
No, I would call it Lower Crown Street. On that diagram, it's not actually really clear. So I'll just point it out if I may, Richard. Sorry, councillor.
Yep.
This is what I'm talking about. Lower Crown Street here, and I'm talking about a small entry in there.
Yep, understood. Understood. Yeah. So it's right at the south western.
Correct. Correct. Yes. I just want to make sure it wasn't.
Just on that point, and I might just pass through the GM to Annie Goodman, who knows the plan intimately, just to address that specific question, if I could.
Certainly. Thank you, Chris, and welcome to the floor. It has been lovely working with you for the past year. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of the work that you do, particularly in Betts Park. It's very much appreciated by our community. In response to your specific question, this is actually quite indicative, as you've already mentioned. So access for the general public around that lower entrance is still available in my mind. So there is absolutely no plan to stop that into the future as this master plan moves forward. So please be assured of that.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Councillors, any further questions of Mr. Martin? Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, Chris, there's a matter also of access that I believe that you and Mr. Bradley both raised in your submissions. There's a map, I'm sure you'll be aware of it, on page 37 of the master plan. And it still shows a red dotted line that goes along Kelly Street, then up the northern end of Dick Street, and goes across. So I think in the discussions we've had that we've agreed that there isn't access there. Is that something that should be corrected?
The consultants addressed that in their response, and they essentially said there'd been a misunderstanding as the tone of what had come through there. And my interpretation of that is that arrow is just indicative. It's not intended to imply specific access through the north of Dick Street. They certainly said that clearly in their response. I haven't got the reference because I can't go through the pages quickly, but I know they've addressed that specifically in the response.
Thank you, Chris. Councillors, any other questions of Mr. Mutton? Councillor Sanderson?
Yeah, look, I did see that response. I don't know whether you had a look to be satisfied with the look with the other access issue, but I don't know whether that should be clarified a little bit more.
Well, the purpose of what the consultants were looking for was just to create the concept that there would be a linkage between the Henley precinct and other valuable community assets. So as I say, my interpretation of their response is that they're saying this is just an indication. It's not to say that particular path is intended.
Councillor Quinn.
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that particular walkthrough is out of the scope of this plan, but it is just as Chris says, alerting to it that it would be good.
Yes, so I might just pass.
If I could just comment, I very strongly feel that the access should not be through the northern end of Dick Street, but as I say, the consultants are not proposing that yet.
Okay.
Mr. Mutton is correct once again. Oh, it must be so nice to be right all the time, Chris. I wish I was. As you said, it is indicative. It's just a guide to thoroughfare throughout throughout the area, as are the black dotted lines and the red arrows on the far side of Crown Street as well. So it is just a guide for pedestrian access, some vehicular access as well, and certainly nothing that council is prepared to change or alter in any way, shape or form outside of the scope of the precinct itself.
Thank you. Any councillors, any other questions of Mr. Mutton? If not, thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Councillors, we have a recommendation on page 174 of the report, item 4.3. Moved Councillor Quinn, seconded Councillor Preston. Councillor Quinn.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I think Mr. Mutton has said it all. I think this is an outstanding plan. It's been through all sorts of community consultation and rigour. And I think that the outcome that we now have before us is absolutely outstanding. And I too congratulate the staff that have been involved in this, particularly Ms. Goodman and the staff that have been involved in driving this project forward. I think we have a wonderful outcome.
Gold standard.
Yes.
Councillors, any speakers against the recommendation? For the recommendation? Councillor Sanderson?
Yes, look, I also agree it's an outstanding result. I mean, there are a few little things I think it'd be nice if we could correct before it goes out, and not just the one I've mentioned earlier. But I thought the consultation process was absolutely outstanding. We had a consultant who was very willing to adapt and drive the process in the direction that the community indicated they wanted to go. So yes, an excellent result.
Thank you, Councillor. Any speakers against the motion? For? Right of reply, Councillor Quinn. If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. Councillors, we'll now go back to the normal order of the business paper. We now move to item 4.1, draft 2024-2025 operational plan. Moved Councillor Quinn, seconded Councillor Crassoy. Any discussion, Councillor Quinn?
Mr. Mayor, the only thing I'd say, and again, it's another compliment to the staff, the way it's presented, I think is outstanding. It's pleasurable to the eye. It's easy to read, easy to follow, see how it's all sequenced. So I'd just like to pay compliments to the staff for the way it's been presented.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. That is certainly a sentiment I share, and I'm sure the council do as well. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Williams.
Could I ask a few questions?
You may.
On page 27, the second item down under the first circle, it says installation of Henley Precinct playground by 30th of June 2025. That's an integral part of what we've just agreed is an excellent plan. But I was just wondering, I don't see in the budget funds for that. Is that progress, or should it be implement?
I'd imagine, councillor, that would have to be done through grant funding, but I'll let the general manager, which wouldn't be budgeted because obviously we'd need to apply for that. But I'll let the general manager.
Yeah, no, that answers the question, Mr. Mayor, because the issue was it implies that it's going to be done rather than possible through grants.
I will add, Mr. Mayor, through you, that we've already made some preliminary submissions for potential grant funding already.
Councillor Williams, you got another question?
Yes. In page 51, which is the character and heritage in places, there's an allocation in the heritage and strategic planning for consultants. I'm just wondering, are we going to continue with a heritage consultant? Is that covered in that location?
General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding, the answer to that question, Councillor Williams, is yes, but I will divert to the Director of Planning to confirm that.
Through you, Mayor, Through you, Mayor, that's correct. We are still continuing to have heritage consultant.
So the existing one will be replaced.
The answer to that, Councillor Williams, is yes.
Good. Thank you. That's the sort of answer I like. 56, point of clarification, and maybe because the Director of Finance is not here, maybe taken on notice, but on page 56, under roads and bridges, Lyndhurst Crescent is referred to twice with different amounts, and Rook Street is referred to twice with different amounts. Is that the one job, or is that a split project thing? Because it looks like it could be a duplicate.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll get the Director of Infrastructure to answer that. Samantha, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It is for either side of the road. So or different sections of the road. So where it's noted twice, it could either be different sections of the road or either side of the road.
Okay, I just making sure it wasn't a double up. So that's good. Okay.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, just to be doubly sure, Councillor Williams, I will check with Maria in the coming days, but I think Sam has answered the question, but we'll just for thoroughness, we'll check that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillors, any other discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Yes, that is carried unanimously. Councillors, I will move to item 4.2, adoption of the financial year 24-25 budget fees and charges and long-term financial plan. Before we do, I just wanted to note that I know that all councillors have received an email from the Messinas with respect to an unmade footpath and with significant attachments, unmade footpath in Sherwin Street, Henley. I am wondering, because this is an ongoing issue for them, one that goes back many years. There is also the unresolved issue of the unmade footpath down Salter Street between some of the Riverglade reserve play equipment and the current connection. I do wonder, councillors, whether you would support an amendment that would bring a paper to the July meeting with costings for those two unmade footpaths, because it just doesn't get captured in our footpath renewal program. That's for you to consider. But do we have a mover of the motion or an alternate motion? Councillor Quinn. Seconded. Councillor Crassoy. Any discussion? Councillor Quinn?
No, Mr. Mayor. Again, I think it's all set out there on that particular issue that you mentioned. I'm well aware of that issue.
I know that you are, yes.
Well aware, and I've personally been extensively lobbied for that strip of footpath. But I think, again, when you check the responses, the correspondence, it all comes down to priorities and where council can spend its money and where the greatest need is. Now, I can see that, there is a need for a footpath there, but where's the greater need? I think we have to, just look at the whole scheme, the whole municipality, and, place our priorities where the priorities need to be placed. And if there is funds available, so be it, but we have to stick with our priorities.
So you wouldn't be in support of a report with those?
Well, I'd be happy with a report.
Yeah, okay. All right.
In the light of where there is greater need. I personally would have greater concern if we've got existing footpaths that need to be replaced that are causing trip hazards, for example, and causing injury to people.
I think that Salter Street one does need to get done.
Well, happy to have a report on it.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. Councillor Williams.
Following on from that, Mr. Mayor, I think when we do make decisions in relation to those sort of issues, we need to refer to our digital planning process, which actually prioritises and captures importance of different, and if that's high up in that list, then that's fine. But if it's not, then other priorities have obviously been reflected in here that have been identified as high priorities. So the report is fine, but unless it comes up in the DAMP, is it, or what's it called? The digital asset management plan. Yeah, unless it comes up in that, which is a fairly sophisticated ground truth process, then it probably would have to wait in the list.
Sorry, the only clarifying comment I'd make there, and I'm happy for Sam to address this, but the issue is And the issue that I think that those 2 footpaths have is that they're not in the DIAP because they are unmade footpaths, and all that piece of tech does is rate our existing footpaths, and that's where this cycle's been caught up in particular that Salter Street one. But Councillor Quinn will know that this has been a long-running issue. It's not actually in the system to be rated at all because they don't exist.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor.
General Manager.
You're too quick, because that was the point that Sam was going to make, that without, just to repeat what you said, that system focuses on renewals. So something that's unmade is not going to be captured. So it does need to be, for want of a better description, a discussion when we want to create a new footpath. But Sam, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's the challenge of asset management, is asset management only covers the assets with which we've got and the condition of those, and any new needs to be done through a strategic process where we're looking at, for instance, our Disability Inclusion Action Plan may be something that highly rates the need for that Salter Street footpath in particular. So we can definitely put a report on.
Councillor Crassoy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Would it require an amendment to our financial plan or a different motion to ask for a report of our existing unmade footpaths and any changed requirements around those footpaths?
Might be something we can add to the motion as a subsequent.
Just simply because I don't know if there's an appetite to do so, simply because unlike the path in Henley, Salter Street has had a change in the way it's used because of the potential development of the Priory project and because of the new playground and the public transport that connects it there. So there's a demonstrated change in the way Salter Street is now being used. But if we're going to ask for a report on our changing needs around our unmade footpaths, then do we just target the 2 that we're being lobbied about, or do we actually look at our unmade footpaths and put together a report, or are they the only 2 we have? So I guess before we make an amendment requesting a report, I'll take your advice.
General Manager.
Just to pick up on what Councillor Crassoy has said, I think we are, to bring some context and to be pragmatic about it, that's 2 different things. So in the spirit of what the Mayor has brought to the floor, my interpretation, and I'm pretty sure it'll be Sam's interpretation, that if you were to support that recommendation on motion, that we would bring back to you the 2 areas or streets in question, specifically with costings. And then you could consider that going forward, for argument's sake, in a standard quarterly budget review. Second one is that we're talking more holistically about saying, in the broader municipality, where is the capture of every street or location that has an unmade thing? That's a very big piece of work, and that will take months and months and months. So I just urge you that in your deliberation, your consideration about what you potentially are going to put into this as a recommendation, I just think you need to take that on board in your consideration, that's all. Because one can come back for those 2 specific things with costing, so you know what you're dealing with, and then you can make that decision in good faith at that appropriate time. But if it's the second one, where we're identifying the broader municipality, that ain't coming back in July.
And therefore, do you need a motion to just request a report on those 2 things?
It's your call, Councillor Cresswell.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to add that to the recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Yes, thank you. Councillors, Councillor Sanderson, you're going to speak to the motion?
Well, getting back to the original motion, if I could, I do have a question, and that relates. There's a table on page 61 of the business paper, and there's in that table, under the heading income from continuing operations, there's an item, other income, of $2.5 million. And the only place where it really tells what that's about is if you go to item 7.2 of the 10-year financial plan, the 3rd paragraph there, says, however, under this scenario, it assumes there will be no income derived from asset surplus land disposal estimated at 2.5 million. Am I right in assuming then that the 2.5 million in the table on page 61 is from surplus land sales?
I would think that you'd be safe in making that assumption, but I'll check with the General Manager.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. The simple answer, Councillor Sanderson, is that all through the briefing of the preparation of the budget, the staff has been quite transparent that that money potentially will come through asset repurposing or the consideration of disposal of land, of which we would bring back formal business papers during the course of the financial year for your consideration in alignment with the policy.
Thank you.
I will also add that our planning of the budget, the key word here is that we've been very conservative in our estimates.
Councillors, any other speakers for the motion? Against the motion?
May I ask a question?
You may.
In the long-term financial plan, which starts at page 118, it goes through great details for scenarios 1 and 2, but is silent on 3 and 4. I was just wondering why we stopped at 1 and 2 in the detail.
Well, Mr. Mayor, firstly, obviously those type of questions would have been handled by the Director of Finance. She unfortunately is not here. I do have May on the line, who obviously works closely with Maria. And thank you, May, at very short notice, even though you're not working today, to come on the call. I'm not quite sure if you can address that, May, but Councillor Williams, can I just ask which page are you referring to?
Oh, well, where we go into the detailed appendix, where we talk about the scenarios, financial scenarios, yes, we do. Oh,
so you're talking about the scenario analysis conducted for a special rate variation application on page 134?
No, I'm a bit further on than that.
It is further on.
We get to the detailed appendix 4 on page 170, scenario 2. Then we have appendix which goes into the detail for scenario 1 on 165, but we seem to stop there. We don't go to an appendix covering the other scenarios. It's just a question. It just seems that so are there pages missing, or have we not done that for a particular
May,
reason?
would you like to, through you, Mr. Mayor, would you like to respond to that, May, if you're able?
Yes, can you hear me? To Mr. Mayor and GM, and to answer your questions, Councillor Ross Williams. I will have to check on the attachments that if you think there's a page missing, but to me, I don't think there's a page missing there.
Thanks, May. We'll double check that, but
Councillor Williams, I'm happy to take the question on notice and get Maria to circulate an email in relation to that question post tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions or comments? Councillor Quinn?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just in closing that, as I say, I'm happy to move it with that additional amendment, but also, you know, I am well aware that there are other places where there need to be footpaths.
Yes. Yeah.
The one that immediately comes to mind is the whole of Barron's Crescent at the eastern end, where there's no footpath on either side.
Yep.
So, you know, that's where it comes down to this priorities issue.
A lot of disabled people.
That's right.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn, for your closing remarks. I'll therefore put the motion or
just through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, can we actually
put the motion on the
get
screen?
the wording of that?
Sure.
That additional. We just need to actually get that
put it up
wording
on screen
before we take to the floor to vote. Do you want to reiterate, Mr. Mayor, the wording that you'd like to see in your recommendation? Or
I'm happy to do that if we can perhaps get it up on the screen.
Did we actually capture that wording?
No.
Okay. Sorry.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
So we've got the main motion as in the business paper, and then added to that is that a report on the a report be prepared on the cost of construction of a footpath in
the unmade footpath. Say.
Well, we want the cost of construction of the footpath.
Yeah.
We don't want an unmade.
Yeah. Sorry, footpath. Sorry.
In William Street, Henley, and Salter Street.
Salter Street.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That gives you enough to go.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn.
Gladesville.
You're good.
Salter Street's Gladesville.
Yeah, Councillor Crassoy, you comfortable with that?
Assuming that the report will include the what gets where that money will come from.
Yes, of course. Yep.
What gets sacrificed to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. Gladesville.
Sorry, it's William Street, Henley, and Salter Street, Companies Code.
Gladesville.
William Street, Henley, and Salter Street, Gladesville.
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry to be a little bit pedantic here.
Yes.
But I just want to understand expectation. So is the expectation that this report will, bearing in mind that July is our last council meeting?
Yes.
So is the expectation from the floor coming back in July?
If that's not attainable, that is not in the motion.
Are you happy to leave it generic?
If it can come back by July,
we'll do our best.
Yeah, but I don't think the council's been overly prescriptive.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Councillors, we comfortable? Yes. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. Councillors, move to item 4.4, Hunters Hill Council Outdoor Sport and Recreation Plan 2024 update for adoption on page 223. Moved Councillor Crassoy, seconded Councillor Quinn. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously.
Yeah, sorry, I should have added just another outstanding piece of work by the council.
A lot of outstanding work coming out of council at the moment. Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Councillor, sorry. Yes, sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, there were two points. As with the Henley Master Plan, there are some minor things I've picked up. Very happy to hand up.
It would be good if you could hand them up. We are now at item 4.5, review of delegations for the DCU meetings on page 294 of the report. Moved Councillor Quinn, seconded Councillor Crassoy. Any discussion? Councillor Sanderson.
Yeah, I won't speak to it at this point in time, but I'd like to foreshadow an alternate motion. If you turn to page 295 of the business paper, there is part of a motion that was a rescission motion that was carried in a meeting on the 14th December 2020. That motion read that any development application that receives 2 or more objections and is not referred to the local planning panel not referred to the local planning panel or other consent authority, be referred to the development control unit for determination. What I would like to do is have as an alternate motion, move something like that. What I will do is make a minor change to the wording that will eliminate part of the problem, and that is that the wording become that any development.
Sorry, Councillor, you're foreshadowing the motion.
Okay. That any development application that receives objections from 2 or more properties and is not, as the other motion reads, and is not referred to the local planning panel or other consent authority, but referred to the development control unit.
Thank you for the foreshadowed motion, Councillor. Councillors.
Sorry, just for clarity, Mr. Mayor, so that's a foreshadowed amendment.
A foreshadowed motion.
Motion if the motion fails.
Right.
Okay. Councillors, Councillor Quinn.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm I'm very comfortable with this. It's not suggesting by any means that we are not going to consider those objections. They will be and have to be considered in any assessment that's done. But to have something have to jump to the next highest level of approval from 2 objections, I think is just too low a threshold, to be quite frank. It can choke the system, if you like. So I think if it's 4 or more, that seems reasonable to me, but 2 just seems too low a threshold. Those objections will have to be considered, as they always have to be in any application that comes in. But we also don't want to make it so tight that things just almost grind to a halt.
Also important to note, I might get the director to comment on this, but we are the only council in New South Wales now with a DCU. There is no other council that has one, and it is quite clear from the report how choked up the system can get when the threshold for complaints is that low that it can get into DCU after 2 complaints. But and as Councillor Quinn said, any complaint made about a development application must be considered by the professional staff. So, Director,
through you, Mayor. On page 298, we are the only council that runs a DCU in that fashion. If you look at the Northern Beaches, have 5 submissions, but they don't run as a DCU. They run as a internal managers conciliation. The objectors don't have a chance to speak, so they have 5, and it's a different animal. And we're the only one that has this sort of DCU process of delegation. The figures on 297 shows it clearly what the councillor Quinn spoke about. They're clogging up, the choking up of applications just sitting there and really damaging our turnaround times. If you'll see in April, 276, and in May, 486. And the reason why we do consider all applications, as you said. We will normally get 1 submission from 2 submissions from one house about a screen or a tree, which we do address. We always address, and we always talk to our objectors. We're trying to further make it more workable with regard to 4 submissions. As at the moment, it's adding no value to the system at the moment because we're not helping people, we're not moving things along. I think the report speaks for itself.
Councillor Quinn.
Just if I may, Mr. Mayor, a question to the director. So when we say submissions, if we go to 4 submissions, if we had 4 submissions from one next door neighbour where there's 4 people living and they put in 4 submissions, does that trigger 4 submissions?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Right.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, to answer that a different way, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. If a husband and wife write 2 separate submissions, that's 2 submissions.
Right. Yep.
Which we get a lot.
Yep.
Yep. Again, we are the only council that runs a DCU in this fashion, and you can tell from the DA's issued average processing time that 486 is not a reasonable processing time. Councillors, any other discussion? Councillor Bergara.
I'd like to foreshadow.
No, another motion. Yes,
this one's not accepted. The foreshadowed motion would be that we abolish the DCU.
Okay.
Well, if no one else has it and there's a process to do it, I know. Let me just seriously speak to that.
Yes.
You've all just approved an operational plan that has, as a strategic measure, a time frame for these things of 90 days. You cannot be serious and have this process, which has 2, 3, and 4 times that, and endorse that operational plan. Get serious. So, I mean, you've got your operational plan that's endorsed. How do we achieve it? Not this way.
to agree with you, councillor, but yeah, well, we're in the council's hands. Any speakers against the motion? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I disagree that it's choking up the system. I don't think the figures, if you analyse them in another way, that it is choking up the system. To have a forum where residents who have concerns can come, express those concerns in a situation where staff and the applicant are present, I think is a very transparent and productive way to resolving conflict or resolving concerns over a development. It's a very efficient way. I think that it's important to note that we are different in Hunters Hill. We do have different issues that we deal with. We have a big conservation area that nobody else has. We have a series of committees and things that many councils don't have. But it's important for this council to maintain its connection with its community and the confidence of the community that we're making decisions that they have a chance to have a role in. When they brought in the new planning process, the Accompanying development process, the local planning panel, that moved very quickly the community to one side. Our DCU process, our Development Control Unit, provides an opportunity for our community to engage in the planning process. And I think that is a very healthy and a very particularly unique and important aspect of Hunters Hill and the way it deals with its community. This issue about individuals and whatever, I think is not all that relevant, because if two people in the household, they have entitlement to have a different opinion and have that opinion recognised and dealt with. You can't just lump a household of people together. They're individuals and they need to be able to express that as individuals. They probably vote differently or have different slices of bread, etc. So that to me is not a real issue. But getting back to the number of the whole process, 90 days, even without the DCU, 90 days is not able to be achieved in most cases. It's a process which in Hunters Hill is an artificial one. It's something that is not achievable under most circumstances because of our conservation, because of consideration of heritage. There's a whole range of issues that drive us to look at things in more detail and consider a range of aspects that somewhere in Blacktown might not. So, for me, I agree. It's erroneous to have 90 days in a community, in a location, and a council such as this. I think it's also important that we analyse, which is not in this report, what extra work is actually contributed to the development program. The staff still have to assess the application, still have to consider and write reports and prepare details. And I know the director's going to point to where he says it saves time or whatever, but there's no critical analysis in that as to what it does save, as to what you need to do in any case. So a lot of what the DCU deals with is already done in any case. The one issue that probably wouldn't be done if it was abolished is the opportunity for residents to come to one meeting and sit around the table and have a discussion. If it is abolished, then you lose that opportunity. When it was first set up, it was all about having all the staff that relate to the development application in the one room at the one time. So it was an efficient way of processing and dealing with the issue, rather than if you don't have a DCU, then you've got the risk of things not being coordinated and being brought together as a whole. So I think Councillor Sanderson's motion, foreshadowed motion, is what I would support. Certainly couldn't support deletion of the DCU. And I think that the threshold at 2 does strike the right balance to allow our community to be engaged in the process if they wish to, or the matter is, well, probably the issue about if the staff's done the work and they're going to refuse it, you don't hold a DCU. So it's only when there is still retaining issues that need to be resolved. And I think it is very important for the residents to have a chance to have their say and know that their views are being considered in a way that is a conciliatory process.
So, councillor, just a question. You're saying that if there's a recommended refusal, that they don't need to hold a DCU, so that the applicant wouldn't get an opportunity to make a submission to the DCU, but the adjoining residents that are putting in a complaint about the prospective DA should get their say, but the applicant shouldn't.
Oh, well, Mr. Mayor, if you put it that way, it does sound imbalanced, but the point is that if it's being refused, then the applicant doesn't need to have a say because the staff have made their decision, made their determination. I don't think that the DCU is held or should be held if it is very clear that the requirements are not met. But the important issue is the opportunity for the parties to get together, have a conciliation process, have an understanding of where there might be opportunities to modify and achieve a common outcome.
I might just let the director address the time constraints that this puts on staff, which is detailed on page 298 of the report. Director.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. On top of the page, first paragraph, 298, we estimate an average of 8 hours per meeting. And then prior to the meeting, at least 3 staff attend the meeting as well, and twice a month for at least 2 hours. So that's a chunk of our time taken out with regard to the 2 submissions. So we're saying if we go to 4, then time will be taken out, but it's valued time. I also want to add the next page of 296 was the averages of 2 submissions, 3 submissions, and 4 to 9. It shows you that 2 submissions, 16 receiving the amount of days, 293, 3 objections, 7 normally received, and we got adds to 167 days, and the 4 submissions go to 307 days. For 11, we receive an average of 11. So yeah, the average of 2 to 4 is a high number of objections received. The answer to that is yes, it does take a bit of time off us with regard to helping the community with their inquiries at the counter or finalising other DAs at the same time.
Councillors speaking against the motion, for the motion? Question. Councillor Preston.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the director. In light of that, and if we're still going to see quite a number of 4 objections, then would we not propose to increase the threshold to 5, for instance?
Possibility in the future, we'll see, yeah. We initially looked at 5. We looked at 5, so we took the threshold of Northern Beaches to 5.
Yeah.
But we did our sums, and it's really forced striking a balance. I think forced the right figure at the moment with regard to our current history.
Okay, yeah, and also in light of Councillor Quinn's point about and contrary to what Councillor Williams said, 1 person can actually make 4 submissions.
Yes,
yes. So I'm wondering whether this short level of protection is really even going to make a difference, but I'm not sure.
We're testing the water. But understand, please don't be disillusioned. A decision that won't change the decision of the council officers or the DCU. The assessment is still there. The controls are still there. It's not changing the decision outcome. It's basically how we get applications out faster and give a service to the community both ways. because we talk to persons that lodge submissions, and it's a simple matter of the fence too high, the screen, or the tree. So we resolve those issues quickly, and they're happy with that, and they thank us for that. And that does take up the neighbours' time with that. But then we've got others that want to play the system and do submissions from one household, and it's the same issue, which we can resolve. That's our frustration.
Sorry, just before we move forward to the director, and maybe Councillor Quinn can probably assist as well. My understanding was that the DCU was established originally to speed up processing times because applicants didn't want to wait between council meetings to get a determination. That its intention originally was to speed application times up. Now that all the other planning laws have come into place, it has the opposite effect.
Most councils of the day had that process.
Yes.
It's the time where applications were dealt with by council delegation to consider application.
Yes.
So then council decided to give delegations to senior staff to fast track simple application. That's how the DCU was established.
Yes. Okay. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I just would
It's a
like
question.
some clarification,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, in relation to page 296. The table at the bottom sets out the breakdown of applications referred to the DCU. Actually, when you go between 4 and 9, then correct me if I'm wrong, the processing time jumps to 307 days, whereas with 2, it's only 293. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to, by going to 4.
Councillor, I would imagine that the number of development applications, which is in the centre column, is the key metric there.
Well, it's not, because you've got 2 is 16 and 4 to 9 is 11. So you've got marginally different numbers and you've got the same outcome. So if we're talking about improving process time, which is, as Councillor Vergara has pointed out, is far beyond the 90 days in any case, I was just wondering whether there is anything to be achieved in terms of processing time.
Director, do you believe
Yes,
there's things to be...
through you, Mayor.
Yes.
If you read the next paragraph, it explains the table in detail. And those numbers on the side, the average turnaround times, they're high, too high. They should be lower anyway. So we're saying they shouldn't be there in the first instance.
Councillor Prieston, question?
Yes, please. Just in light of your musings around the original intention of the DCU. So what is the value of actually having a DCU if it's doing the opposite thing to what it was intended to do?
Good question.
Genuine question, not being facetious.
To the director, or is that hypothetical?
Whoever, no, genuine question.
To the director?
Yes, please.
Well, General Manager, we've always looked at continuous improvement. So I've been reviewing this issue for a while. So one of the ways we can reduce our numbers, which we've done some other internal changes. So one of the other issues is, this is what I thought, to make things quicker, faster, and turn around. I have not put my head around deleting the DCU. I like to sleep at night.
Do you think that deletion of the DCU would improve DA assessment time?
Most definitely.
Yes. Councillor Vergara, question?
No, I'm not sure if I'm talking for the motion or against it or for shadow motion, but I just want to say this. Something needs to be done, whether it's maybe making it objections from a single household or it's increasing the number. But let me say this to councillors. You've just adopted an operational plan which represents to this community the priorities, programs and services you plan to deliver. If you do nothing, that is a lie. It's a misrepresentation because you know we're not delivering it on these DAs. So something has to happen. And it might not be abolishment, that might be extreme, but I wanted to put you in a frame of mind where you understood something has to happen if you're not just adopted an operational plan that is lying to your community.
Councillor Preston, then Councillor Quinn.
Sorry,
Councillor
just another question. What would be the practical effect on anything else? Like, are we in contravention of some legislative instrument or something if we were to abolish the DCU? What would be the flow?
Again, sorry, councillor, we're the only council apart from the beaches that has it, but I'll let the
Can I
director.
just add to that? The flow-on effect through you, Mayor, would be efficiencies.
Right.
Efficiencies and not having to go through that additional process where we can delegate applications, get them done on delegation.
So there's no negative.
There's no legislation requirement. No,
right.
Councillor Quinn.
Would 5 make it even that little bit more efficient?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Councillor Crassoy. Speaking.
Why not make it 10 then? Like
Fourth, the motion. Sorry.
May I?
Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak for the motion that Councillor Quinn has moved, and I'll do so just because, well, I'm not against what Councillor Vigar is proposing. I'm a big opponent to policy on the fly. And so I wouldn't object to seeing a report on what you're proposing down the track that future council might deliberate on with the benefit of some briefing and education around it rather than a learning session during a council meeting. I would say that with 4 or 5, I don't know, Councillor Quinn, are you planning on something? Or? No.
Well, look, I'm happy to amend the recommendation to make it 5.
Which I would happily second.
Thank you.
Yep. And with that, when I stood up, I bumped my computer, but there's a spreadsheet, there's a graphy thing on one of the pages, and it shows that under delegated authority in, I think it was April, there were, thanks, Councillor Williams, mate. Sure. Thank you. In April, there were, I think it was April, yep, there were 73 days was the average under delegated authority in April, and in May it was 123. So that's an average of 96 or 7 days. Now, if you free up a whole heap of properties that are currently slipping into the system by rorting it, the process, then that's potentially going to come down as well. So I think that what the officer has reported, and certainly with Councillor Quinn's adjustment, I think that that would be good water to test for a while. But I wouldn't put it past the opportunity for the next council to potentially have the appetite to review and understand this a lot more. I wouldn't recommend it tonight, and that's why I'll support the original motion moved by Councillor Quinn.
As amended.
As amended. Councillor Preston.
I'll speak against the motion as amended.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
I actually approach this report thinking, oh, that sounds good and that's a good way of testing the waters, and I think I'll vote in favour of the report tonight. But after this discussion that we've had in the chamber, I am not convinced that the threshold of 4 submissions would materially change or improve the process as it is today. And obviously there are a lot of issues around it, and it's something that continually is brought up and continually requires reform in Hunters Hill, for reasons such as the fact that one person can make multiple submissions, and I'm not talking about a household, I'm talking about one individual. So what's to stop people who are gaming the system, as Councillor Crassoy alluded to, from realising that the threshold is increased only by 2 more submissions and sending another 2? Pardon? 3. Sorry, yes. 3, I just am, that's quite an easy thing to do, in my view, if you were to game the system in the first place. So I would potentially be in favour of further amending the threshold to make it slightly higher, and looking at average processing times and the table on page 296. it's still quite high between 4 and 9. So as Councillor Williams pointed out, so I think that we could do more. We already know that it's an issue. We already know that this would improve efficiency. So I don't know why we don't push harder, to be frank.
Councillor
Mr. Mayor, to the director.
Yes.
So if an individual puts in an objection and then submits another objection, is that 2 or is that 1?
No.
One person lodges 2 submissions, that's 1.
One.
Okay.
That's 1.
Yep.
That's right.
I thought that your question was that.
No. My question was from a household. So if you have 5 individuals in a household putting in 5 submissions under different names.
It has to be a different name.
Yeah.
Councillors, we've had speakers for, we've had speakers against. You haven't spoken against. Councillor Sanderson, would you like to speak against?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, the reason I came up with this amendment or foreshadowed motion is I was quite surprised when I read the report to find that a household wasn't being counted as a single submission. And when I found that out, I thought, well, look, a better way to approach that is to ensure that we have households restricted to a single submission. Look, they can make multiple submissions if they like, but should only count as 1. That way, you've got the opportunity, if you've got a bad development and you get objections from either side of it, to me, that seems quite fair. There could be some very substantial reasons. So it's far more logical to do, as I'm suggesting in the in my foreshadowed motion, that we limit it to, as I've said, that any development application that receives objections from 2 or more residences, or 2 or more residences, and it's not referred to other bodies, be determined by the Development Control Unit. That is aimed at what the problem is. The problem is that people are, as people have said, are rorting the system by having multiple submissions from a single household. That should be the first step in resolving any issue. We don't need to go artificially pushing these numbers high if we don't have that restriction. I think that is an essential part of any motion to ensure that we're not getting I think it was mentioned in the report, you get a husband and wife, and then they employ a consultant, and then it becomes 3 submissions. That should be 1. And if we adopt the wording that I recommend in the foreshadowed motion, that resolves it. It'll instantly take 4 of those of that 16 off the number of development applications that were where there were 2 objectors. The other thing I have concern about is that there is actually a decision of the DCU in another item in this paper, and it was one that I was very aware of. Now, that one first came to DCU in October. Yes, it had 7 objections. Yes, it would have been seen by the DCU anyway. But the staff recommendation there was for approval. Now, people came to me and I had a look at it and I thought, no, it just seems completely wrong. When it went back, it was reviewed. Yes, there was a recommendation later on for it to be refused, and it was ultimately refused. But my point there is that an individual can make an error, and it is good to have processes in place like the Development Control Unit will pick those errors up. And I think we've got to prioritise what we have in Hunters Hill. We're losing too much of it as it is. We've got to give neighbours the opportunity to fully explain themselves. That's what the DCU process does. I don't think it should be reduced in any way. Its recent history came from the time when we introduced local planning panels. At that time, and I experienced a few meetings like this where we had controversial development applications. Well, they didn't just come to council because there were a number of objections. I think there were 1 or 2 that Councillor Williams actually brought to council. And we went through a proper process. The DCU has had to fill that gap, and it should do, right down to two households objecting. So that'd be my position, and I think with I've suggested a small, my view on adjusting systems is you adjust them gently. You don't go making radical changes. What I'm suggesting is a gentle change. Instantly, you'll have 4 less matters going to DCU than you currently have. Do things gently. Don't go making radical decisions.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crassoy.
It's a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Through you, I wonder whether the General Manager has some advice he'd like to offer to the whole council on this, or?
General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respectfully, councillors, this is your decision. I think that the officer who respectfully has been here a long time and has seen what's worked and what doesn't. The only comment I'd make is that it does take a lot of time with the officers to do agendas, minutes, et cetera, for a DCU process. And I don't think that that's an efficient use of our resources. And if you go to the end of the process, the more and more that we make inefficiencies in our processing, the greater risk is that ultimately we end up in a court. And I don't think that we can just disregard that. And I actually think the officer has been incredibly measured in the approach within the report.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillor Bergara.
I foreshadow an amendment to this motion for the consideration of the mover and the seconder.
Yes.
Which, if accepted, I'd support the.
You can move an amendment and it can be accepted into the motion. So doesn't need to be foreshadowed. Yep.
Add a point 3 to the recommendation.
Yes.
Which is that council receive a report, efficiencies and the future of the DCU. So accepting what Councillor Crassoy said, I think that's right. Accepting what Councillor Sanderson said about small changes. Let's make this small change now in the motion, which is the 5 to 9, and consider the efficiencies and futures of the DCU once we get the expert opinion of the officer.
Happy to accept that, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Councillor Crassoy, are you happy to accept that?
Yes.
Yes.
Just a correction there. So it's efficiencies and the future of the DCU.
And for the DCU, and I assume that will give us time to see whether 5 to 9 has made a material difference as well.
We're not putting a time.
Probably next term, I would imagine. Councillor Sanderson.
Could that just be scrolled so I can check that my foreshadowed motion's been correctly recorded?
Yes, there it is, Councillor. Councillors, we have a amended and re-amended motion on the table. Have we all had our say? I think we have. Councillor Quinn, would you like right of reply?
Yes, look, I will, Mr. Mayor. I 100% agree what the General Manager just said, that the Director has been very measured in this. The Director is very aware of the Hunters Hill community, and when we tweak with these things. And I agree, I think he has been measured also, but I think it's also taken into account the general sensitivities around this whole issue in our community. I personally think abolishing the DCU in tonight's meeting would be going a step too far. So I think we've taken a step here to increase our efficiencies, and that's the main reason that this motion has been brought to council tonight. And hopefully by raising that threshold by 1 more, it can increase the efficiencies by just that little bit more as well.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Councillors, we'll move to item 4.6, update on the New South Wales Government housing targets. Moved. Councillor Crassoy, seconded. Councillor Quinn, any discussion? I might just let the Councillor Crassoy, or would you like the Director to give an update prior?
Sure, the director's update first would be helpful.
Director, would you perhaps
Thank you.
elaborate on your report?
Just in short, just to give an update on the new targets. Initially, our targets were 150 to 200. Now, the release of the current targets are 400. The way they see on page 301, it shows how they have come about the targets. They plan new houses, projected new houses, and they end up with the new targets. In the report, it talks about how the departments come about and the constraints associated. And on page 302 provides the whole of New South Wales and targets other municipalities. We are the lowest, but having regard to our constraints. And then we also highlight in the report the areas that there could be potential for new housing: Gladesville, Huntersville Village, Baronia Park, the former Gladesville Hospital site, and Montefiore. And it gives you the estimated unit numbers there as well. And the issue there is it's a 5-year completed program. Me personally, I think it's a big ask having regard to the economy and the constraints. However, we're here to assist and help, and we have got a strategic program in place for the municipality and for our community as well.
Councillor Cresswell.
Well, thanks. I actually did wonder, and I apologise for not asking sooner. I just wanted to add that I wondered whether this report could be available to the minister for their consideration, for their digestion.
Happy to send it to Minister Scully.
Thank you. You don't need that added in.
I'm happy to flick it forward. Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Williams speaking for the motion.
Well, it's to receive a note. I'll make some comments. I find this process extremely unfair and difficult to comprehend. On one hand, we've got an arbitrary target that we must meet in 5 years, but we have no control over the levers to achieve that. We already have a stock of or locations where development could be taking place tomorrow, but it's not happening. There's a whole range of economic, resourcing, decision-making processes that are well out of control of this council, and we're being held to account to a figure that I think was mentioned just a moment ago is not likely to be achieved. And in any case, it's putting us in a position of not being able to achieve it because we have very little control over the levers that drive it. Also, I'm curious, on page 304, the paragraph that starts in the 12 months of June, 4 completions were recorded for Hunters Hill in the government's thing. There's no reference there about criteria. What justifies something going on that site? We must have had more than 4 approvals in that period that would relate to additional housing. There's dual occupancies happening. There's apartment buildings going up there's modest multi-buildings going up in places like Massey Street and in High Street, etc. I'm just wondering, what is that criteria? Because I don't see it in the report, nor do I see it anywhere in the literature as to what constitutes a completion to go on to that. So the other issue that I note in the report is a reference to Montefiore on page 303, where it says 144 independent living units and 194 beds in the aged care area. I think that needs to be quantified a bit differently because they're taking away a lot of beds to allow the independent living. So when you do the sums for that, it basically is not a big improvement. It tends to imply that there's sort of another 300-400 opportunities there. So I think that figure needs to be clarified and adjusted. But overall, I think it is very regrettable that the government is going down this path of setting figures that are going to put most councils in a position of not being able to achieve it, because they don't control the development industry. They don't control the levers which allow these completions. And even at the recent local government conference, well, last year, the professor got up and said there was 185 approvals that are not being acted on by developers already in the system. So if they're not doing it already, bringing another 400 homes on the line in the next 5 years in Hunters Hill, what's going to force them to be completed? The council's going to be left holding the problem. So I'm happy to receive a note, but I'm not happy with the position the government's taken on this and the position it's putting this council in.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vergara.
Just a question on the completions. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director, if you have a single dwelling that's going to be knocked down and a duplex built, does that count as only one completion because you take away the one you knocked down?
It's through you, Mayor. It totals one. New completion is completed, occupied, constructed.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further discussion for or against Councillor Sanderson?
Yeah, I've just got a question relating to the Director's earlier comment. It would seem that that figure of 4 seems quite low given the amount of dual occupancy that's being built, particularly in areas outside our conservation area. Is that the Director's impression?
Director?
Well, these are the figures that we received, and they're accurate figures. I can go back and check them, but like I said, it's if you're looking at new buildings in the area, if they're a new house, it's a zero add to it. It's really a new domicile, new dwelling, completed. It's got to be completed as well, so it's going to be new and completed. So I can check the figures, but these are the figures that we've been provided and checked. I know they look low, but that's a matter of fact.
Councillors, any further comments, discussion? Councillor Sanderson?
Yeah, if I could, I'd just like to comment on one of the issues that Councillor Williams raised. That is Montefiore. I happened to look on their site this afternoon. I noticed at the present time they're advertising 333 accommodation units, or whatever you want to call them. Another way you could derive it, if you add up the different types of units they have, that comes to 330. If you add the two numbers that are given in the dot points on page 303, that comes to sorry, what's the figure? Anyway, what it amounts to is that 338. Effectively, that whole Montefiore development, this has been one of my concerns from the outset there, that whole Montefiore development will account as 5 extra residences, as far as I can see. So again, grossly unfair to the way this matter is being handled by the government.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillors, any further discussion?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Reply?
Thank you.
Councillor Cresswell.
Just to observe, like how disappointing it is where a really nice opportunity to be chipping away at this comes up in the next report about a development application that's been languishing on Ryde Road since I became a councillor. And the reasons that it was rejected, which are multiple, with the developer just, what were they thinking when it doesn't satisfy so many provisions within our own planning laws and within the EPA Act as well. And so I think that's one of the reasons I was hoping that we could send this report to the Minister, is to just demonstrate that in this report, actually, as all of you have just highlighted, there is a way for us to meet these targets, but it's not our fault if developers are coming into town, with their guns holstered a little too low around their hips, and like we've got to have rigor in the way that we manage and oversee these developments. And so I'm grateful for the decision of the planning panel around that frankly disappointing solution for Ryde Road, because we need more townhouses and small apartments in Hunters Hill. And I also, the reason I want to see it go to the minister is because it highlights the constraints that are out of our control, as Councillor Williams said, and not the least of which is that where is the physical delivery of public infrastructure and the services that are going to accommodate that new housing that needs to be delivered by the state? And so while I don't object to a growing population, we live in Sydney, and the role that Hunters Hill has to play in that, I think it can be done tastefully and with good oversight. The minister needs to be aware of what our, not limitations, but what our constraints are. So it's a very well done report. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crassoy. Councillors, that concludes debate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. Councillors, just wanting to check items 4.7 DAs determined by the LPP, 4.8 development applications determined by the DCU, 4.9 development applications determined under delegated authority, 4.10 report on legal matters, 4.11 summary of council investments, 4.12 councillor briefings and workshops, 4.13 minutes of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, and 4.14 minutes of the Bushland Management Advisory Committee. Are there any items that that councillors wish to speak to, or can we do them in block?
I only have a question about 4.9, so it could still be tidied up.
Slip in here. Yeah. Councillors, are we happy to move that in block?
Yep.
Yes. Moved. Councillor Preston seconded. Councillor Bagara. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. We will move items 4.7 to 4.14 in block. Moved. Councillor Crassoy seconded. Councillor Preston. Councillor Crassoy, you have a question?
Yeah, just about 4.9, about the Lacantro Cafe. I'm just curious to understand how the proposal is proposed additional outdoor seating, but the total number of patrons, 30, remains unchanged. And so is it that the venue is moving their indoor seating outdoors? And I'm just curious to understand that.
Through you, Mayor, the application was to add more outdoor seating.
And yet, but then it says the total number of patrons, 30, remains unchanged.
So that doesn't change. It's add new seating outside.
Yeah, they're allowed 30 patrons. It's not, but the seats aren't.
The seats inside aren't changed.
And they are allowed to see more people outside. I'm not going to explain this properly, but there's a maximum of 30 people, as in patrons. This process will be much cleaner when businesses can just apply for outdoor seating as opposed to going through DAs. But under the current system, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director, every time an additional seat is approved for outdoors, they need to go through a DA process, and the total number of patrons is static. That is correct.
Can I just say that that's not the intent. The intent from memory was to increase the outdoor seating. They're also thinking of further adding another application for more seating. So things will change again.
Councillor Williams.
Just a minor question, Mr. Mayor, on that item. Does the Centro still exist? I thought they...
It's changed names.
Changed to Cafe Hunters Hill. Yes. Councillors, any further questions? If not, I'll put the motion in block. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. Questions without notice. Sorry, Councillor Sanderson, there is a question without notice on page 357.
Yes.
Do you wish to ask any further clarifying points?
Look, I'd just like to speak to it briefly if I could. After our last meeting, I thought there was still some doubt about the eligibility of some of our LPP members as to whether they could continue to serve. For that reason, I wrote to the Director of Planning panels and got a response quite promptly, and that is quite clear in that the response said Council can appoint export community members that have served less than 6 years for the new term commencing on the 1st of July 2024. This means that those who applied or those appointed at the commencement of this term can apply to continue, provided they're still on the list, one presumes. But what I'd note is that I'd like to see those people continued, because they were selected through a process that has been regarded by this council as being a high value and rigorous process. That came around through a notice of motion of mine initially it was determined at a meeting on 1st of February 2018, and again with a similar motion at the beginning of 2022, sorry. The other thing I'd note too, that in the answer they're saying that, or that suggested that the names of people who are available to go on these panels appear on the panel or appear on council's website, and it was only May. I think it should be a case of should. At the time that the names of these panel members were made available to councillors, there was quite a lot of detail given in those sheets, and certainly I would accept that it's fair enough to redact any of the addresses or any other contact details that are available on that sheet. But there was other information I think is valuable in allowing people to understand the abilities of the members that are on that approved list. These include qualifications, nominals, area of expertise, and councils for which they are prepared to serve. I would suggest very strongly that if this information is going to be made, and it should be for the, I believe, for the just to show the openness of the process, both to councillors and to the community members. So again, I reiterate, I believe that all of that information about all of those members should be made available on council's website.
Councillor, that correspondence gives me pause. The fact that after a discussion was had at council, instead of seeking clarifications through our Director of Planning, that you went directly to the Planning Panel Directorate and made representations as if on behalf of council. That is concerning to me, that you wouldn't just send an email to our Director of Planning or our General Manager to seek clarification on these things that are detailed here.
Clarification at the meeting. I didn't believe I was, I wasn't satisfied with what I had. If you look on the planning panel's website, it's quite clear that there are contact details there. I sent that inquiry to the address that was given on that on the website. It was quite welcoming of any inquiries.
Councillor, but my point was that you didn't go first to our professional staff at council. You've sought to make representations to the department purporting to be from Huddersfield Council.
As I explained, I made those inquiries at our last meeting.
And at the last meeting, you got an update from the staff that was true and correct at the time.
Mr. Mayor, I was not satisfied with it.
Well, that's disappointing, Councillor. Councillor Crassley.
Sorry, the process for a councillor, if they feel that they have an objection to something that they are dealing with from the operational side, from a code of conduct point of view, what is the correct process to follow for a councillor who's feeling that they are not getting satisfaction from the operational team?
It would be first to go to the General Manager, then to myself, and if they're not satisfied, to go through the Office of Local Government.
Through their men.
Councillors, is there any? Councillor Williams?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Just a question that comes from the response from the Director of Planning panels. it makes reference here that the only role of council, council's the panels are independent and not subject to direction of council, other than procedural processes. That may be technically correct, but it doesn't flag what is in the legislation, which council has a requirement, an obligation to monitor the performance of local planning panels, particularly in relation to how their decisions are made against our policies and strategies. Given that, the question would be, has that situation or legislation changed? If not, have we provided progress or performance reports in relation to, and they're supposed to be annual, to the directorate in relation to council's considered performance in terms of adhering to policy and strategy?
Oh, Director, if you wish to respond.
Can I get some clarification of that commentary? Is that on page 358?
Yeah, it's at the bottom of page 358, the last paragraph. There's reference there to the role of councils with the independent planning panels.
I didn't make those comments, and that's a snippet from the director of planning panels. That's her commentary. I didn't make that comment.
I'm not saying you did,
right,
but I'm saying there is another dimension to our role as a council with local planning panels, which is to monitor their performance and report to the department on that performance against policy and strategic directions that we have for our planning processes. And there's also a requirement, as I understand it in the legislation, that we're supposed to provide performance reports to the department as to how the council sees it fulfilling those strategic and policy directions.
Your question is whether or not we have provided the requisite progress reports to government.
Yes, given the first question is, are we still required to perform that role? Because what the department has said only deals with part of the issue and tends to imply that council has no role. But the legislation, in my understanding, requires council to have a role, albeit at measuring performance and also reporting on that performance.
Director? I think we're going to have to take that notice. Any other items of general business, councillors? If not, thank you all. I will close the meeting at 10